Dear Cousin Edward, I take quill in hand with the heaviest of hearts. But the Crown has denied us our rights, the very rights that all Englishmen of the colonies should hold dear. And now the time for redress is upon us. I implore you, dear cousin, to hear of my accounting of the events at Lexington, and to come to our side in the coming struggle. I take quill in hand with a heavy heart, for the events of this day have unsettled me in ways I could not have imagined. The sun has barely crested the horizon over the quiet fields of Lexington, yet the echoes of musket fire still linger in my ears, a grim herald of what may be the dawn of a great conflict. In the early hours, before the first light of dawn could grace the earth, I was roused from sleep by a frantic pounding at our door. The sound echoed through the stillness, sharp and urgent, reverberating off the wooden walls of our humble home. Rising with haste, my heart thudding in my chest like the drums of war, I hurried to the door, scarcely pausing to gather my wits. There, framed by the dim light of a solitary lantern, stood one of our neighbours. His face was ashen, his eyes wide with alarm and terror. "The regulars are coming," he managed to say, breathless, his voice barely more than a rasp. "The militia is gathering on the green." There was no time to ponder. The gravity of his words sent a shiver down my spine. But I knew what was expected of me. I dressed as swiftly as my trembling hands would allow, my thoughts a whirlwind of dread and determination. To stand against the might of His Majesty's forces, to raise arms in defiance of the Crown, such thoughts would chill the blood of any man. Yet I knew where I must be, among my fellow townsmen, standing firm against what we perceive as tyranny and fighting for the rights we hold dear. As I stepped out into the cold morning air, the mist clung to the ground like a ghostly shroud, illuminated only by the dim glow of lanterns carried by the few who were already on their way to the green. The world felt eerily still, as if nature itself held its breath, awaiting the storm to come. My breath was visible in the chill air, mingling with the fog as I made my way through the quiet streets, every step echoing with the significance of what was to come. As I neared the green, the sight that greeted me was one I shall never forget. The mist hung low, swirling around the feet of the men who had already gathered. There they stood, perhaps 70 in number, their faces barely visible in the gloom. Some were seasoned veterans of the last war, their faces lined with the marks of past battles, hardened by the fires of combat. They stood with a grim resolve, their hands steady on the muskets they carried as if this was just another day in the life of a soldier. Others, like myself, were young and untested, our hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and determination, our hands not quite steady as we took our places among them. Captain Parker, our leader, stood before us, his voice steady and measured as he gave us our orders. "Stand your ground," he commanded, his gaze meeting each of ours as if he sought to imprint his resolve upon us. "But fire, not unless fired upon. If they mean to have a war, let it begin here." His words, simple yet full of resolve, stirred something deep within me, a sense of purpose that quieted my fears. We took our positions, muskets at the ready, forming a loose line across the green. The moment stretched on, each second a test of our resolve. The silence was heavy, almost oppressive, broken only by the distant sound of marching feet. A sound that grew steadily louder, the rhythm of it like the beating of a giant heart. And then, through the mist, they appeared. The regulars, a column of red-coated soldiers, emerged like phantoms from the gloom, marching in perfect order down the road toward us. Their bayonets glinted in the dim light, a line of steel that seemed to pierce the very soul. The sight was both awe-inspiring and fearsome. These were men well versed in the art of war, their movements precise, their expressions hard as stone. How could we, mere farmers and tradesmen, hope to stand against such a force? The officer at their head, a man of stern and unyielding demeanor, called for us to disperse. His voice was loud, commanding, leaving no room for doubt as to his intent. The command hung in the air like a death knell, but we stood fast, our breaths shallow, our hands gripping our weapons with white-knuckled resolve. The tension in the air was palpable, each breath heavy with anticipation, each heartbeat a drumbeat in the stillness. Time seemed to slow, each moment stretching into eternity. The regulars halted, their ranks perfect, their faces impassive as they awaited the order to advance. The officer's voice rang out again, sharper this time, a command that brooked no disobedience. "Disperse, ye rebels!" But still, we stood our ground, the weight of our decision pressing down upon us like a physical force. And then, as if in a nightmare, the crack of musket fire shattered the morning stillness. The sound was deafening, a roar that seemed to come from all directions at once. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. Chaos erupted in an instant. The sharp retort of muskets filled the air, a cacophony of sound that drowned out all else. Men fell beside me, their cries mingling with the thunder of gunfire, their bodies crumpling to the ground as if struck by an invisible hand. The air was thick with smoke, the acrid scent of gunpowder burning my throat and stinging my eyes. I fired my musket, the recoil jarring my arm, the force of it nearly knocking me back. Whether my shot found its mark, I cannot say. There was no time to see, no time to think. The world around me had become a whirlwind of noise and motion. I saw men I knew, neighbors, friends, fall to the ground, their bodies crumpling as if struck by an unseen hand. The regulars, advancing with bayonets fixed, moved with a relentless precision, their red coats vivid against the pale mist and the dark earth. The militia, less organized, fought back with a fierce determination, each man standing his ground despite the odds. The sounds of battle, the clash of steel, the crack of muskets, the shouts and cries of men, filled the air. A cacophony that drowned out all else. I felt a sharp pain in my side, though whether it was a glancing blow or the shock of the battle, I could not tell. My hands moved almost of their own accord, reloading my musket with a speed I did not know I possessed, my fingers working with a desperate urgency. Around me, the battle raged on, the ground beneath our feet turning to mud with the blood of the fallen. I saw a man beside me, his face twisted in pain as he clutched at a wound in his leg, his musket falling from his grasp as he sank to the ground. The sight filled me with a cold dread, but there was no time to help him, no time to do anything but fight. The regulars pressed forward, their bayonets gleaming as they advanced. I could see the determination in their eyes, the cold, hard resolve that drove them forward, step by step. We fired again, the roar of our muskets blending with the shouts and cries of the men around me. The smoke was so thick that I could barely see, the world around me reduced to shadows and silhouettes, the sounds of battle crashing over me like a wave. Suddenly, a figure lunged toward me, a bayonet flashing in the dim light. I barely had time to react, raising my musket just in time to deflect the blow. The force of the impact sent me staggering back, the shock of it reverberating through my body. The regular before me was a young man, his face set in a grim expression as he pressed the attack. There was no hesitation in his movements, no sign of fear. Only the cold, calculated efficiency of a soldier trained to kill. We struggled, the bayonet slashing through the air as I fought to keep it from finding its mark. The world around me narrowed to this single point of conflict, the noise and chaos of the battle fading into the background as I fought for my life. The musket in my hands felt heavy, awkward, but I managed to hold my ground, deflecting blow after blow, my breath coming in ragged gasps. Finally, with a desperate shove, I managed to knock the soldier off balance, his bayonet plunging harmlessly into the ground beside me. Seizing the moment, I swung the butt of my musket toward him, the wooden stock connecting with a sickening thud. The soldier crumpled to the ground, his face contorted in pain, his hands clutching at his head. There was no time to dwell on the victory. All around me, the battle raged on. The sounds of musket fire, the clash of steel, and the cries of the wounded filling the air. I reloaded my musket, my hands moving with a speed born of desperation. The movements automatic, drilled into me through sheer necessity. The regulars were relentless, their advance steady, their bayonets gleaming as they pressed forward. We fired again and again, each shot a desperate attempt to hold them at bay, but it was clear that we were outmatched. As the smoke began to lift, the horrifying reality of our situation became all too clear. The ground beneath our feet was strewn with the bodies of the fallen, a gruesome tapestry of blood and mud. The green, once a peaceful common where children played and neighbors greeted one another, was now a battlefield, its serenity shattered by the carnage of war. The regulars, their ranks still unbroken, advanced with grim determination, their bayonets gleaming as they pressed ever forward. I could see the resolve in their eyes, the cold, unwavering focus of men who had been trained to kill without hesitation. They moved as one, their red coats a stark contrast against the pallor of the morning mist, their discipline and precision a terrifying sight to behold. We, on the other hand, were a ragged, disjointed group, bound together only by our sheer determination to defend our homes and our rights. There was no order to our lines, no coherence to our movements, only the desperate will to survive. As the regulars drew closer, I could feel the tension building within me, my heart pounding in my chest as I prepared to face them once more. I reloaded my musket, my fingers moving with a practiced speed, my mind racing as I tried to anticipate the next attack. The air was thick with the acrid scent of gunpowder, the smoke clinging to my skin and clothes, burning my eyes and throat. The sounds of battle, shouts, cries, the deafening crack of musket fire, were a constant, overwhelming roar, drowning out all other thoughts, leaving room only for the primal urge to fight or flee. The regulars were upon us in moments. The first of them lunged forward, bayonets thrusting with deadly precision. I barely had time to react, raising my musket to parry the blow. The force of the strike sent a jolt of pain through my arms. But I held my ground, gritting my teeth as I fought to keep the weapon at bay. Around me, men were engaged in similar struggles, the clash of steel against steel filling the air with a harsh metallic ring. Time seemed to slow as I fought, each movement deliberate and calculated. The regular before me was relentless, his attacks coming in a flurry of swift, precise strikes. I could see the determination etched into his face, the cold, hard focus of a soldier who had been trained to fight without emotion, without hesitation. My breath came in short, ragged gasps as I parried blow after blow, the weight of my musket growing heavier with each passing second. Finally, I saw an opening. A brief moment where the regular's stance wavered, his balance shifting as he prepared for another strike. Seizing the opportunity, I stepped forward, driving the butt of my musket into his chest with all the force I could muster. The impact sent him stumbling back, a look of shock crossing his face as he struggled to regain his footing. But there was no time to celebrate the victory. Another regular was upon me in an instant, his bayonet flashing toward my side. I twisted away just in time, the blade slicing through the fabric of my coat, but missing its mark. The soldier's momentum carried him past me, and I turned, raising my musket to fire. The shot rang out, the recoil slamming into my shoulder as the regular crumpled to the ground, his body falling limp at my feet. The battle had become a brutal, desperate melee, with men locked in close combat, their faces contorted in fear and determination. The battle had become a brutal, desperate melee, with men locked in close combat, their faces contorted in fear and determination. The air was thick with the stench of blood and sweat, the cries of the wounded and dying mingling with the clash of steel and the thunder of musket fire. It was a scene from hell, a nightmare made real. I fought on, my movements fueled by a mixture of adrenaline and sheer willpower. My arms ached, my breath came in labored gasps, but still I fought, determined not to give an inch to the enemy. I saw men I'd known all my life fall beside me, their bodies crumpling to the ground as they were struck down by bayonets or musket fire. The sight filled me with a cold, numbing dread, but I pushed the fear aside, focusing only on the battle at hand. The regulars were relentless, their advance unwavering despite the losses they had suffered. They moved with a precision that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying, their bayonets flashing as they pressed forward, step by step. We fought back with everything we had, firing our muskets, parrying their strikes, but it was clear that we were being pushed back, our lines faltering under the relentless assault. And then, as if by some miracle, a shout went up from our ranks. Reinforcements had arrived, more men from the surrounding towns, hastily assembled and rushing to our aid. The sight of them filled me with a renewed sense of hope, a surge of determination that banished the weariness from my limbs. We pressed forward with a renewed vigor, the arrival of reinforcements giving us the strength to push the regulars back, inch by bloody inch. The battle became even more fierce, the fighting more desperate, as both sides struggled for control of the green. I found myself locked in combat with another regular, our movements a blur of strikes and parries, each of us trying to gain the upper hand. The clash of our weapons rang out, a sharp, metallic sound that cut through the roar of the battle. My muscles burned with exertion, my breath coming in ragged gasps as I fought to keep the bayonet from finding its mark. The regular before me was a seasoned fighter, his strikes swift and precise, his movements fluid and deadly. I could see the cold determination in his eyes, the unwavering focus of a soldier trained to kill. But I was fighting for more than just survival. I was fighting for my home, my family, and the rights we held dear. The thought gave me strength, a resolve that pushed me to fight on despite the exhaustion that threatened to overwhelm me. With a final, desperate effort, I managed to knock the regular off balance, his bayonet slicing through the air as he stumbled back. Seizing the moment, I raised my musket and fired. The shot rang out, the recoil slamming into my shoulder as the regular crumpled to the ground, his body falling lifeless at my feet. The sight was both horrifying and a relief, a grim reminder of the cost of this battle. But there was no time to dwell on the victory. All around me, the battle raged on, the green a chaotic maelstrom of smoke, blood, and steel. The regulars were relentless, their discipline and training evident in every movement, every strike. But we fought back with everything we had, driven by a determination that was born of desperation and hope. The minutes stretched into an eternity, each second a battle in itself. The air was thick with the stench of gunpowder, the smoke clinging to my skin and clothes, burning my eyes and throat. The sounds of battle, the crack of muskets, the clash of steel, the cries of the wounded, were a constant, overwhelming roar, drowning out all else. Finally, after what felt like hours, the tide began to turn. The regulars, seeing the arrival of reinforcements and the determination in our ranks, began to withdraw. Their movements were still precise, still disciplined, but there was a hesitation in their steps, a reluctance to press forward against the onslaught. As they retreated, we advanced, our shouts of victory mingling with the dying echoes of musket fire. The green, once a peaceful common, was now a battlefield, littered with the bodies of the dead and dying. The sight was a horror beyond anything I had ever imagined, a grim reminder of the cost of this battle. As I pen this letter, and the sun has risen fully, casting its light on a scene of sorrow and devastation. What began as a dispute over rights has now turned to bloodshed, and I fear this is only the beginning of a conflict that will consume us all. I cannot help but think of you, dear cousin, and wonder how you would have fared had you been with us today. I know your loyalty to the crown is steadfast, and I do not fault you for it. But I must ask, can you not see the justice in our cause? We seek not to overthrow the king, but to secure the rights that are ours by birth. Rights that every Englishman ought to hold dear. I implore you to consider what has transpired here and to weigh it against the loyalty you feel so deeply. We are not traitors, Edward, but men fighting for the freedom to govern ourselves, to live as free men, not as subjects to a distant power that knows nothing of our struggles. I hope this letter finds you in good health, though I fear it brings little comfort. Know that despite the conflict now between us, you remain ever in my thoughts, and I pray that one day we may find ourselves united in this struggle. Yours in hope and determination, Jonathan Whitfield. 19th of April, 1775.